Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of the Pole Position Podcast. I'm your host Jack Price, and in this episode we are going to be talking about the breaking news that's happened in the last few days in the sport of Formula 1. We're going to be talking about the subjects such as the new calendar that has been coming out, the new revised calendar for 2020, revealing to us the first 8 races that are going to be in F1 for the 2020 season. All the races are in Europe. This is the first stage, and we're going to be going through all the races and talking about Chase Carey, the director of Formula 1 and the CEO of Formula 1. He's going to be talking about some of the points about the calendar, about the regulations, about the safety, about the sport now it's coming back. So we're going to be talking about what he's been saying and discuss. We're also going to be talking about Sebastian Vettel and talks about him maybe joining Mercedes, either alongside Lewis Hamilton or maybe somebody else. So that's talked about, and of course we're also going to talk about Christian Horner and his thoughts on maybe the return of Sebastian Vettel to Red Bull. This is all going to be coming up on this podcast, so without further ado, enjoy the podcast. So the first main news story that we're obviously going to talk about is of course F1 confirming the first 8 races of its revised 2020 calendar, and this starts with an Austria Grand Prix doubleheader. Now, of course, we all thought this was going to be the case. A few weeks ago, they were talking about how we could have doubleheader races. Silverstone was lined up for it. Austria was lined up for it. So there's been a lot of discussion over the last few weeks about how this revised 2020 calendar is going to look. And F1 have come out with the first 8 races. Now, these are all European races. I'm not sure whether more European races could be added in the future, but at this moment in time, this is what they've lined up for us. Because I know, like, Germany was, or like Hockenheim was on the back burner just in case any other races couldn't do it. So I don't know if, like, we have maybe a few races in Asia that can't do it, whether they'd then go back to Europe and have a few races there again. I'm not sure, but at this moment in time they have put out 8 races for the calendar, so I'm going to put them on the screen now. This has come off the F1 website. And we're obviously having 2, like I said, back-to-back races at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. The first being on July the 3rd to the 5th and July the 10th to the 12th. So they're going to be staying in the area, I think, because there's like an airport there as well. There's like a hangar there, so I think there's hotels nearby. So everybody will be staying in that area for that week between the races. And of course, like I said, we've got a double header there. We then go to Hungary, around the Hungaroring, on the July the 17th to the 19th. We then have 2 double headers in Silverstone, so 2 British Grand Prix. One says like the actual British Grand Prix, and the next one says Formula 1's 70th anniversary Grand Prix. So I think in both double headers they've named them a little bit differently. So it'd be interesting to see how they're not just saying British Grand Prix 1, British Grand Prix 2. They're actually named them differently, but they are at 2 are at the same circuit. So the Silverstone one, like I said, July 31st to August the 2nd, and August the 7th to the 9th. F1 then travels to Spain at Barcelona, the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya. Obviously they did a lot at that racetrack in February and in March as well in terms of testing. So everyone will know that circuit like the back of their hand, so it's great to have Spain back as well. And then that's the 14th to the 16th, and then August the 28th to the 30th we have the Belgium Grand Prix in Spa, which is great to have on the calendar. There were a few worries that we wouldn't have some of the main tracks in this calendar this year. Of course, we lost Monaco, and that was announced a few months ago that we wouldn't have the Monaco Grand Prix this year. But that race here in Spa is in the calendar, and the one after it as well, which is a key one, is in it as well, which is the Italian Grand Prix in Monza, which is September to the 4th to the 6th. Now, I'm not actually sure, but I think the Belgium Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix on this calendar are roughly the same dates as they were before we had the pandemic that come around the world. So I think the dates are almost the same as what they would have been beforehand. They might actually be the same dates, but again, I'm not too sure because they took down that calendar for me to sort of have a look at. All the races as well will be supported by Formula 2 and Formula 3. which again is great to see. Like, they're not just bringing back the actual Formula 1 races, they're bringing back Formula 2 and Formula 3. I haven't heard about the W Series yet. I'm not sure if this is in this article. Because that was a possibility of the races being used for that as well. Obviously, we had the American Grand Prix last year, that the W Series would be there. So, I'm not too sure about that one, but Formula 2 and Formula 3 are on the grid as well. In terms of finalising the actual calendar, Chase Carey, which we're obviously going to go into as well, had an interview with Formula 1. He was interviewed by Tom Clarkson, and he said that hopefully by the end of June we will have a main idea as to where we think the whole calendar will be in terms of the countries we'll be visiting and the racetracks we'll be visiting. Obviously, we know as well that there won't be a Dutch Grand Prix this year, like I said in the last episode. That's been delayed till next year because obviously there wasn't going to be any fans at this race. Just to make that clear, there will be no fans at the races for these first 8 as well. They expect all of them to be closed events, but hope fans will be able to attend again in the future. Again, what Chase Carey was said was the fact that hopefully in the fall of this year we will see fans back at the sport. They cannot guarantee that obviously we'll have full grandstands again. I don't think that will be possible until next year at some point. But we will see a few fans being able to come to the events. I mean, how they're going to deal with tickets, I'm not actually quite sure. But they have said that they'll love to have fans at the race if possible. Obviously, still probably dealing with guidelines in the fall, so that's something to look forward to as well. Obviously, health and safety is the number one priority going into the Formula 1 at the minute, and they've been revising this detailed plan for the last few weeks and months to make sure they have everything in place. Chase Carey said, in the past few weeks we've been working tirelessly with all our partners, the FIA and the teams, to create a revised opening 2020 calendar, allowing us to restart racing in the safest possible way. We are pleased to be able to set out our opening 8-race calendar and look forward to publish our full calendar in the coming weeks. So like I said, this is in the process. They are looking at creating the full calendar and showing us where we're going, speaking to all the partners, all the racetracks in terms of how they're going to be doing it. He says, I want to thank every promoter and partner for their support and ongoing commitment to Formula 1. So we were obviously still getting all of them wanting to compete this year and trying to get all the tracks back. But some of them like Monaco and that, it's going to be difficult to put in place. Like I said, we do have Austria and Silverstone as double headers. And he was actually asked a question on, have they had any ideas as to how to maybe spice it up? That wasn't the word they used, but that's how we're sort of looking at it. How are you going to spice up the races between, both races being at the same track? Could we do a reverse grid in terms of, whoever qualifies on pole starts at the back? That was, I think, not unanimous, and Chase Carey said in the interview it had to be unanimous for them to implement that change. I think Christian Horner said earlier on in the week that it was Mercedes that weren't the ones to sort of go with that vote. I think they said, we want to make sure that the sport isn't using gimmicks. This isn't like the words that they use, but it was more in things like, we want the racing to be the racing. We want people to watch the sport because of the actual racing, and if somebody qualifies on pole, they should start on pole, which I completely understand. But I think you've also got to look at it in the fact that we can't have, if somebody's quick in the first race in Austria, or a team is quick, then surely if nobody changes anything, that team should be the quickest again in the second week. So it might just be the exact same, grid and the exact same finish. So, I think they have actually got to work about that and how we're going to make each race individual and each race, because people won't want to tune into the second race because they'll already know what's going to happen really. So Chase Carey has said that they are looking into, ideas of what they can do. But it has to be sort of, we're so close to the date, it has to be a unanimous decision, which I completely, obviously understand that. There could be an option where maybe they go the other way around the track. I mean, that's another option that could be open. There's so many, so I won't go into them because obviously these things haven't been discussed yet, but I think, that it's something that maybe we need to go into because otherwise, it could be exactly the same race. the second week around. So we'll just have to see on that. In terms of the revised budget as well for 2021, Chase Carey said it's been very busy. I feel that we've made good headway, and it's obviously still a work in progress. Actually, having the pandemic has created a sense of urgency, whereas some things that may have been on the back burner before have had to be pushed forward. And we've made great progress in terms of things that maybe we weren't going to look at until later on this year or next year. The time frames have sort of come close together and stuff like that. He also talked about Project Pit Lane and how the teams normally are rivals, but they've all come together. He said it really shows the spirit of the sport and the fact that it is a big family. Obviously, families have squabbles, which is what he's talking about in terms of the rivalries they normally have each week or every other week when the races are going on. But as a family, they all come together and work together. When times like these, have come about. So I think it does show how well Formula One have sort of come together, and I think it's good that as fans as well, we're seeing that there are going to be races, and there is going to be a race happening in less than a month's time, which is fantastic news. Obviously, as well, we're talking about this is just the European stage. The opening 8 races of the calendar will take place in Europe across 6 circuits. The target for it has been to achieve 15 to 18 races this season. In terms of how confident I think F1 are, they're saying we feel good about it. We're obviously in uncharted waters, but we're making headway in terms of how we can see to make as many races as possible. Now, obviously, myself and my good friend Jamie Davis have already discussed the fact that if there was only 8 races this year, which races we would have gone for. And of course, that's if you're watching on YouTube, the video is obviously in the order and has been uploaded now. And of course, if you are listening via the podcast route, that podcast should be one of the previous episodes as well. So check that out and obviously let me know what your 8 races would have been as well. But in terms of that, they are looking to have 15 to 18 races this season. Obviously that's good news. It could have been a different way to do it if they just said we're only having 8, but they want to put as many races, of course, in as possible. They still have partners, they still have sponsors. Some tracks are saying we still want to go racing. So I think they've obviously got to work around it. Their priority, of course, is safety, and they want to make sure that everything is done in the right way, and have to deal with any issues. As their plans for restart are supported by the teams and drivers, making it clear that everybody in the sport wants to get back racing, but of course in a safe way. And with a confidence, we have the right procedures in place to be able to do it in the right way. So, like I said, this has been thought about for the last few weeks and months, how to get racing back, but how to get racing back in a safe way. Now he was also asked about the fact that if there would be another incident like we had in Australia, I'm just going to see now if I can see it in an article. So obviously I had the issue in Australia where first practice was just about to start, and then we had the fact that McLaren announced that they would have to withdraw from the actual weekend because one of their team members had contracted the virus, and then that meant that the whole weekend after that was going to be cancelled. F1 and Chase Carey say they are much more prepared, should I say, to deal with any repeat scenario that they get. So an individual having been found with a positive infection will not lead to a cancellation of a race, is what Chase Carey said. We encourage teams to have procedures in place, so if an individual has to be put in quarantine, we have the ability to quarantine them at a hotel and to replace that individual. And that's even the case for the drivers. So Chase Carey said in the interview, if a driver contracts the virus, they have to obviously quarantine themselves and self-isolate. But there are obviously reserve drivers in place in a team. So if one of the main drivers gets the virus, then a reserve driver can come in place, and that'll be the same thing for anybody else in the team. Now he obviously talked about safety as well, and said that there isn't a possibility that all the time everybody in the pit lane can keep 2 meters apart from each other. He obviously said as an easy one, when they're doing pit stops and they're changing 4 tyres, it's not possible to all keep 2 meters apart, but they're doing as much testing as they can, and they want to do like testing every 2 days to make sure that, you know, if a new virus pops up, if somebody does contract it, then they have enough time to quickly self-isolate them, and hopefully that won't make an effect. We wouldn't be going forward if we were not highly confident we had the necessary procedures and expertise to provide a safe environment and manage whatever issues arrive. So, like I said, you know, this has been well thought out. They've obviously talked about as well that it's not just us that are returning. We've obviously had German football that's been back for the last couple of weeks now, I think. I think NASCAR's looking to be restarted as well. The Premier League, in terms of the Premier League football, I think that's back June the 17th. June the 19th, something like that. So they're restarting as well. So he said it's not just them. We want to bring, I think the words were, bring it more back to normality, but obviously with guidelines and in a safe way. So I think a lot of the time he used the word safe and in a safe environment, and of course that's what that they want to hear. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously more information in terms of the cost cap as well. Like I said, the cost cap was supposed to be, I think, 175 million per team from 2021, but it's actually been reduced to 145 million following agreement of all the teams. That will slide down to 140 million in 2022 and 135 the year after. This will significantly reduce the gap in spending between teams. And again, he did have a lot to say about this. I'm not going to go into a full detail. I have just watched the interview. So if you want to feel that want to hear the full detail from what Chase Carey has said, that will be on the F1 website. And it was interesting for him to hear him, because most of the time you don't hear from him. It's normally, like, I normally hear from like Ross Brawn or the teams themselves, so it's nice to hear Chase Carey coming out and doing a full interview like this. But he said it's critically important for the sport to really have competitiveness, try and get that word out, and the action on the track that we want. It's not accidental that the three teams that have essentially won every podium in the last 5 years are the three teams that have spent significantly more than anybody else. So hopefully he's saying that the budget will, in turn create more competitive racing. I think that's what we're all hoping for as well. All the teams have agreed, so I think they're feeling that they're in agreement as well. Even like a team like Mercedes that have been winning for year after year, I think even they feel they want more competitive racing, not just between their drivers, but between the teams. Because I think if you win the Constructors' Championship or the Drivers' Championship when it's so close, then I think you have more of a sense of pride of how well you've done. That's not to discredit what they've done in the last few years. Their team have been fantastic and obviously have been the best team. But I think if you're like fighting between all the other constructors and you win, I think there's a bit more of a sense of pride in that as well. So that's been talked about as well. So like I said, that's a full in-depth video that's on the F1 website. Tom Clarkson interviewing Chase Carey about the news in the last few weeks regarding the 2020 calendar, new regulations, and agreements between the cost cap as well. That's what's going to be talking about in that. And I'm now going to be moving on to Toto Wolff explaining about his Mercedes driver plans. So yes, at this moment in time, we all know there's been a lot of driver changes, a lot of announcements before the season in 2020 has actually started. Carlos Sainz is going to Ferrari alongside Charles Leclerc next year. Daniel Ricciardo is going to McLaren alongside Lando Norris. And we have a 4-time world champion at this moment in time not in a team for next year. We also have Lewis Hamilton, who's not actually signed for Mercedes at this moment in time. So we have a lot to discuss, and Toto Wolff has been discussing that. About a month before, like I've already said, the season is about to start. Toto Wolff has been speaking about the possibility of recruiting Sebastian Vettel at Mercedes for next year. And he said it is very much still a possibility. Now, both seats are up for grabs for Mercedes in 2021. Like we said, Lewis Hamilton hasn't signed a deal, so it is technically up for grabs, but I think we all know that if Lewis still feels like he can win another championship at Mercedes next year, he's obviously going to sign for them. It's just a matter of signing the paper and agreeing the money, let's be honest. I think Lewis Hamilton's seat is safe, of course. It will be Valtteri Bottas's seat for next year that will still be up for grabs. Again, that depends on how well Valtteri Bottas does at the start of the season. We've obviously seen articles from like Mika Hakkinen that obviously looks after Valtteri Bottas in terms of a bit of a management, says that we've been pushing him to be the best driver he can be, and he thinks this year will be his year. Hopefully, from my point of view, I hope that as well, because I do like Valtteri Bottas as a driver, and I like him, seeing him on track and also in the paddock. Yes, okay, he doesn't speak much, but I like the way he goes about his business. So I am a big fan of Valtteri Bottas. So I hope as well, from if what Hakkinen's saying, it is his year to really challenge Lewis Hamilton. That's what I want. So yeah, hopefully that is the case as well. But just in terms of what actually Toto Wolff said about it, he said. We owe it to a four-time world champion not to come out and say straight away, no. You need to think about it. On the other side, we have a fantastic lineup at the minute. I am happy with both our drivers, and of course we also have George Russell, who is a Mercedes Junior driver currently racing for Williams. But he put at the end of that, you never know. So again, that's him sort of giving journalists and actually myself a story to talk about. One may decide if he doesn't want to go racing anymore, and suddenly you have a vacant spot. That's why I don't want to come out in June and say no chance, Sebastian, and that he's not racing for us. So he's also saying there, if Lewis Hamilton also might come out and say, actually I don't want to race anymore, then if you've already said no to Sebastian Vettel, that might be a mistake in itself. So I think he's definitely just leaving all the cards on the table. He says, first of all, I wouldn't do it to him as a driver, and to be blunt, and on the other side, I have seen black swans appearing when nobody expected. He's obviously talking about Nico Rosberg when he won his championship in 2016, suddenly deciding that he wanted to retire from the sport. So, I think Toto Wolff obviously didn't see that coming, so he's saying that in terms of anything can happen in that scenario. Of course, he's also talking about George Russell in the scenario that Williams are in at the minute, which I've discussed as well in previous videos about how they're doing financially and could they have to sell, could they leave the sport. So he's obviously looking at where George Russell could be, and if it's a possibility that maybe Williams don't make it on the grid for 2021, we need somewhere to put George Russell. Is he going to be better than Valtteri Bottas? Do we put George Russell in alongside Hamilton? That's another option. I think Esteban Ocon's also another option, which I've talked about previously as well. Yes, he's at Renault, but I think that's either only a 1 year or a 2 year deal. And I think he's still with Mercedes. I'm not sure. I think Mercedes did loan him out to Renault. So I think he's still on their books somewhere. He's obviously not being talked about in this article, but I don't know if it's just because he's just joined Renault, so they can't really talk about a driver who's literally just joined from Mercedes to Renault for the 2020 season. So I think that's why Toto Wolff hasn't talked about him yet. But of course, he has stated that he is happy with the driver lineup he's got now of Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. So who knows? Like I said, I hope it is Valtteri Bottas' year and he really does show Lewis Hamilton and compete with him this year. If he does that, then of course he will be alongside Lewis Hamilton next year, no matter what. But he has left it in there to talk about Sebastian Vettel being at Mercedes. Now, would I want Sebastian Vettel at Mercedes? I think it would be interesting. I think maybe if both of them came out and said this would be their last year as well. Both of them said we'll sign a 1 year contract, and for 2021 this will both be our last years. Now obviously that would be a headache for Toto Wolff anyway, because not only would he have to deal with them for a year, he'd also have to find replacements for both of them. So I don't think that would be even a possibility anyway, but I think it would be quite cool if both of them said it would be their last year and both of them were fighting in the same team for their last World Championships. I think that would be really interesting. Do I think it would happen? No, I don't think it would. I think Mercedes have learned from what happened between Hamilton and Rosberg to not really go about doing it again. If Valtteri Bottas does, like I say, improve, it might be a possibility in that sense that could happen, but who knows. So yeah, in terms of that, just in that, would Sebastian Vettel make a good fit at Mercedes? I think that'll be an interesting topic to talk about. I'd love to know your thoughts on it as well. Do you think Hamilton and Vettel could work at Mercedes for 2021? And the last topic we're going to talk about is Red Bull. Now, obviously, this again is talking about Sebastian Vettel and the possibility that he could then rejoin Red Bull. Christian Horner, in response to this, has literally just said, "We are happy with the driver lineup we've got. We are happy with Verstappen and Albon." Now, of course, they changed drivers last year, halfway through the season. Pierre Gasly got dropped back to Toro Rosso, and Alex Albon got promoted to the big boy team alongside Max Verstappen. So Alex Albon only had half a season, the end of the season, to sort of fight against Max Verstappen. So he hasn't had a full year against the Dutchman. So I think, obviously Christian Horner wants to leave him in for the year, see how he does, see how he competes against Verstappen, and then see, where it is. Obviously, I think Alex Albon should be given this year. Obviously, if he improves, it's a no-brainer to keep him. If he didn't improve, and maybe he didn't show his qualities, then I think it's interesting. Could that be a possibility? I still think Vettel and Verstappen wouldn't work as a partnership. I don't think so. I think they've had too many sort of barmies on track to sort of work together in a team. I just don't think that would work, and I think obviously Christian Horner thinks that would work. He already thinks Vettel and Hamilton would be a headache if he was Toto Wolff, so he wouldn't put them two together. So I don't think he'd put Verstappen and Vettel together either. He's obviously said, look, Sebastian is a great driver. What we achieved together was huge. 4 back-to-back consecutive championships. He's obviously made his decision to leave Ferrari. That's his choice. I'm sure he thought about it long and hard. But we are happy with the driver lineup we've got right now. So Christian Horner is obviously saying that Alex Albon is in their plans to just be their driver for next year alongside Verstappen. He then goes on to say Alex was getting stronger throughout last year. We had Max on a long-term contract, and our ideal is to continue with those two drivers. Obviously not for just this season, but beyond to 2021. So he's obviously there, even in there, committing that both drivers will be their drivers for next year, as well as this year. So yeah, I personally think that there isn't much of a story between Vettel going back to Red Bull. I don't think it's a possibility, and I weirdly think it's more of a chance that Vettel would join Mercedes than he would go back to Red Bull. Again, that's another point. Let me know your thoughts on that, and whether Vettel would more likely go back to Red Bull than he would join Hamilton or somebody else at Mercedes. Again, it all depends on Lewis Hamilton as well. Does he decide to stay at Mercedes? Does he decide to stay in F1 this year as well? This is all talked about. Sebastian Vettel could just retire, but I personally think if he was going to retire, he would have said that already. He would have said already this was his swan song. I don't think he would do that either this year, simply because of the fact that there will be hardly any fans at the grounds to sort of say goodbye to. So look, this is all just discussion. It's all still up in the air. So it's my view as well as yours. Like I said, I'd love to know your thoughts on the situations as well, and on the news stories. That sort of rounds up the news that's happened in the last few days. If there are any more breaking news, I'll obviously, of course, do a video about it, or I will do a podcast about it. I'm obviously ecstatic that we've obviously got news now of Formula 1 coming back. It's fantastic to hear, and I can't wait to watch the racing again and obviously discuss it more. More videos, more news articles will be coming out in the next few weeks, I'm sure, as everyone gets ready for the racing again. More videos will be coming out. We'll be doing race previews, race reviews, any other topics. Like I said, I'm looking forward to doing them. And it's good to actually know that we do have some racing coming back now in July and throughout 2020. So thank you very much for watching the video, or if you're listening to the podcast, thank you very much for listening. And I look forward to doing another video and doing another podcast in the near future. So thank you very much, and I will see you all in the next one.